Do you have anybody? Okay. So everything's good. And I'm going to share our screen, but I'll start with Christ is risen. I'm glad you guys in Catechism. We're going to talk about Orthodoxy in America tonight. So present. Okay. And there's a few hiccups because I recently had to upgrade my computer. It was had to switch to a new computer. A lot of the settings are not there.
Yeah, that always happens. I had that experience with the new Outlook this morning and had to switch back because it just wouldn't do everything.
Okay. It wants to make sure. Password, of course. I'm so sorry. I should have practiced this beforehand. It's very frustrating. I was to spend a whole day trying to transfer over to the new computer. And I had done the work of having a backup of my computer. Okay. And then it turned out the new one didn't have a hard drive large enough to let me just transfer it over. And that was very unfortunate. Okay, maybe. And I just realized that when I did this, I didn't make myself an administrator. So I'm having to remember Rachel's password. Okay. I'm going to have to quit the, no, I'm not.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Say hi, Lily.
This is our granddaughter, Lily.
Hello.
Say hi. Hi.
Say hello.
Hello.
His name is Brandon. Brandon, yeah.
Deal?
Hi, Brandon. So what kind of work do you do that your boss is telling you're in the wrong line of work for being Orthodox?
Okay. Maybe
Electrician.
Yep. I was an electrician in the Navy, so I have some familiarity with that.
Yeah. Industrial, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like we're all good.
Oh, there it is.
There we go.
You guys can see the
Yes.
screen. Good deal.
Yeah.
So tonight I'm talking about the history of Orthodoxy in North America, and it'll involve the ethnicity, the ethnic issue. Orthodoxy has a very evangelical nature. Orthodoxy in Orthodox missionaries have been part of our history. In the 9th century, Greek missionaries, Saint Cyril and Methodius, and we're actually going to commemorate this weekend, went out to the Slavic tribes in Eastern Europe to bring the Orthodox faith to them. And they clashed with the Roman Catholic missionaries. In one important area, Orthodoxy has always taught that people should be able to worship in their language. But among some of these cultures, it first became necessary to create a written language. And that was the case. The Eastern European alphabet among the Russians, the Bulgarians, the Serbians, it's called Cyrillic, named for Saint Cyril and one of the missionaries. And so they did the work of first creating a written language they could translate the Bible into, the services, the catechism, so people would understand. And so about a century after Cyril and Methodius, the work was there when the Russian emperor, the Russian prince, wanted his country to become Orthodox. And so that groundwork was done. And then centuries after that, almost 1,000 years later, when Russian fur traders discovered Alaska, one of the things that was happening is that the natives were being exploited. This was around 1790. And so people of a better nature, some of the business leaders, they appealed to the Russian government and the Russian church to send clergy, to send priests to Alaska to help champion, to help take care of the Russian natives. So in 1794, and this is a quote from one of the first saints, St. Herman of Alaska: "For our good, for our happiness, at least let us make a vow that from this day, from this hour, from this minute, we shall strive to love God above all else and to fulfill his holy will." And St. Herman really lived that. When he was a group of 8 monks that arrived on Kodiak Island and lived among the native people. The natives knew St. Herman as Abba, or Grandpa. He was very protective of them, and he lived out there with them by himself. Like, he was the only one of his group, and the others, of course, Alaska is a huge place. The others spread out, and I'll speak more about one of the other monks in a minute. But St. Herman would do the services Ben was mentioning to me, asking earlier, about being able to do these services at home. St. Herman wasn't a priest, but when he did the services, the natives could hear a choir there in his hut. The angels were there worshiping with him. And so, and they could see a light, a bright light coming from his cabin. He was a very beautiful saint. I recommend reading more about him. I'm going to kind of give the highlights of some of the figures, but I'm wanting you to be aware of them. But St. Herman was able to prevent when a tsunami hit Kodiak Island, he went out and placed an icon on the beach, and the waters didn't go past it. And when he died, he was very revered by the Alaskan natives, and centuries later, we were able to locate his burial place, and we have his on some of the icons of St. Herman. It has scenes from his life around the edges, and one of those scenes, you actually see an iconographic image of a helicopter, because when his remains were discovered and transferred, the only way to get to Kodiak, actually it was Spruce Island, a smaller island off of Kodiak. The only way to get there was by helicopter. So that moment is commemorated. But later, the Russian church sent Saint Innocent. At the time, he was a family man, a priest. His bishop wanted him to go to Alaska. His wife was not happy about it. His mother-in-law was really not happy about it. But he moved out there with his family and his children, and he took the task very serious. He began the real translation effort. Like Cyril and Methodius, he studied the natives as like an anthropologist. Some of his anthropological works are still used today. He was very thorough in his journals that he kept, and he was able to translate the scriptures and liturgy into their languages. And like Cyril and Methodius, had to create a written language for them. He would travel by kayak across the Aleutian Islands. Really devoted his life. It was, and in one of his journeys back to give a report in Moscow, he learned that his wife had died back home. And one of his requests to the church was that they really needed a bishop out there. So when it was reported that his wife had died, they made him bishop. So he returned to Alaska. He had his children there. He worked very hard. Eventually they replaced him and made him the head bishop over the Church of Russia. But then a watershed was when Alaska was purchased by the United States, and the center of the church was moved to San Francisco to be there in the mainland, and it was recognized it would now be under the American jurisdiction. So the church had a foundation there in the 19th century. the church in Russia, and was gradually able to spread outside Alaska, California. One of the significant things in the 19th century was when, let me ask this, are any of you familiar with the Eastern Catholics?
The Antiochian Catholics?
No?
No. Okay.
No, people under Rome who
Yep.
appear to be Orthodox.
Passingly, but yeah, I'm familiar with the concept at least.
Yeah. So, and this is, I guess, is kind of relevant considering we elected a pope today. They elected a pope. A pope was elected. Originally, it was in the area there on the border of in Eastern Europe, the Carpathian lands, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia. As some of these areas would go back and forth, and they'd come under a Catholic monarch, there was pressure put on them to come under the Catholic Church, and they were told, you can keep your worship, your liturgy, your everything you do, just be under allegiance to the Pope. And this model was later used in Lebanon. There's a Greek Catholic church there. In other places around the Middle East, in Iraq, Romania, there's about 25 of these groups that by appearance would look Orthodox. And if you're just a less, somebody that's not well read, you would think, well, this is the church I'm familiar with. In Birmingham, we have two Lebanese churches that are Eastern Catholic. I've been to one of them, and they do look Orthodox. But if you're ever, when you visit, you'll recognize this is a cloned body. The soul is not Orthodox. The soul is Catholic. So they ran into a big problem when the Eastern European immigrants came to the United States, immigrated here, better life, like a lot of the immigrants. They sent home for priests to minister to them. And one priest in particular, Father Alexis Toth, now Saint Alexis Toth, he went to give his credentials to the local Latin bishop and the Bishop John Ireland, and he refused to allow him. He refused to recognize him. He said, do you have a wife? And he said, well, no, she's reposed. And he said, but you were married. I don't recognize you as a Catholic priest. And he met this enormous resistance and decided we should go back to our historic faith. And he led a huge missionary. He contacted the Russian church, was received into the Russian church, and led a huge missionary effort, just traveling around the country. That by 1916, 163 churches had been brought in, over 100,000 people. 100,000 formerly Eastern Rite had joined the Orthodox Church. So there's
We just commemorated him this week, right?
Yes, he's on the calendar. Good for you for noticing. He was on the calendar earlier this Wednesday, I think. Yesterday. So he is a very important figure in our history, and it is unfortunate that for the Catholics that Bishop John Ireland was so stubborn. It cost them dearly. There would later be more Greek Catholics that would come into the Greek Orthodox Church. But the 19th century is when you really start to see other Orthodox ethnic groups come to America. I think 1895 was the first Greek church in New Orleans. And originally, they were part of the Russian church. Because they came here and they were in a survival mode. They're trying to survive, and you would find that they put together benevolent societies to help their fellow Orthodox, their fellow Greeks or Serbs, and they tended to. Well, they would write back home and ask for the church to send them a priest that was of their ethnicity. It's important to note here that the idea that you have to be Greek or Russian or Serb to be Orthodox is a heresy, and it was condemned in the as a heresy. Orthodox faith is for everyone, and that's very important. But a lot of these communities, there were many that were multi-ethnic, and you did actually have Americans that converted. There's a very wonderful story of a Father Raphael Morgan. He was African American, who was an Episcopal priest and converted to the Orthodox faith. There were, even going back to the Revolutionary War, there were converts to the Orthodox faith. But it was very unfortunate that because of this need to survive, the churches started to organize along ethnic lines. And then in the 1917, you had the Russian Revolution. And this caused immediately support to the American church was cut off. And this caused huge problems for what is now the Russian church then, and I'm talking about the predecessors to our church. We belong to the Orthodox Church in America that has its roots that go all the way back. But we were realizing that we had to basically operate on our own without being under the Soviet government back in Russia. The Russian church in the Soviet Union was heavily persecuted, and loyalty was demanded of the government from the Russian church. Some of the church went underground, but certainly the church in America couldn't be under that connection. So that's when we became a basically independent body. And it was at this point that the Greek archdiocese was formed. That Ben and Shannon, are you familiar with the term Antiochian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That episode.
So these are people that were mostly from Syria, Lebanon. They Palestinians would come under their church. But they were early on some of those that supported services in English. One of the early saints, I didn't mention here, Subdeacon of Moscow, who was head over the American church, he started pushing for services in English. And he was eventually called back to Russia, where they made him the first patriarch since Peter the Great. But he was heavily persecuted, and he's the one who told the American church, "You're probably going to need to operate on your own as you see fit." So it is this Russian church became the Russian Orthodox Greek Catholic Church in America. You see the influence there of Alexis Toss missionary efforts. I felt like one of the historic moments is when that brought recognition among the American people of the Greek Orthodox faith. This was fairly significant, I think, in our history. In 1965, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was marching in Selma, there was the head of the Greek Orthodox Church, Archbishop Yakovus, who marched with him arm in arm. The Greeks had been heavily persecuted by the Ku Klux Klan, and they could see they felt a brotherhood there, and this was, and you see on the cover of Life magazine there, this was quite a shock to the American people to see this black robed figure that they had never, and so there began to be some awareness of the faith in this country. The founder of our diocese, Archbishop Dimitri, he himself converted in the 1950s from the Baptist faith, and I'm going to share with you his life soon. It's very important. He was very much a missionary in the American South, and he was the first bishop of the Diocese of the South. I like this this quote that the New York Times made there. The striking cover of Time magazine that showed Dr. King side by side with the black-garbed Archbishop Yakovus marked a new presence of the Greek Orthodox in American life. People started to become aware that we were out there. In 1970, finally, there had been negotiations with the Patriarch of Moscow between our church and the Patriarch. He granted us independence, and we became the Orthodox Church in America. And we started to become more of an American church. And then in Brandon, are you familiar with this book?
Becoming Orthodox?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have it, but it's been suggested to me.
When Father Basil and I were looking at the church back in the 1980s, late 1980s, the author here, Father Peter Gilchrist, I guess he was Father Peter Gilchrist. He was part of a group of Campus Crusade ministers who had, back in the late 60s, started to explore what the early church was like, how they worshiped. And they were discovering it was very much like the Orthodox Church still does. and he wrote a book called The Physical Side of Being Spiritual. Father Basil got a hold of that. He was instrumental in us becoming Orthodox. It was ironic because later, when Father Basil moved to Alaska, he was roommates with Peter Gilchrist's son, and they're now best friends. Father Peter John Gilchrist, and he got to spend a lot of time with Peter Gilchrist. They ended up joining the Antiochian Orthodox Church, 2,000 of them, in 1986, and it was the largest conversion, I think, at one time of non-Orthodox to the Orthodox Church in one moment. I think another watershed was when a Greek monk from Mount Athos moved to the United States in 1989 and saw there was a real need for monastic life in this country. And because of him, there were eventually 19 monasteries across the country, including Alaska, that are now spiritual centers of pilgrimage. Elder Fromm, I've known many people that made pilgrimage to his main monastery in Arizona. I still recommend, it's part of the Orthodox life to make pilgrimages to monasteries and shrines.
That's where my prayer bracelet come from.
Good for you. Which shrine was that, or monastery? St. John's?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you can, that's a wonderful thing. That was, and back 2 years ago when Rachel and I took our trip to Romania and England, and people were asking, I told them I'm going to Romania for mission work. No, I'm going on pilgrimage. And even in the UK, I was able to go on pilgrimage to several sites. But we actually got to go to Iona. Was it Iona? Maybe it's Lindisfarne, which was actually absolutely incredible. But so in your life, when you have that opportunity, I recommend trying to find, Brandon, you've already done it. Try to find monasteries that you can visit when you can, or sites associated with saints. So this is, I think, a fairly complete list of the American saints. In a couple of weeks, 2 weeks after Pentecost, we'll celebrate all of them. And so our country has produced so many wonderful saints. I'll share with you a few of them. That's an actual photograph of St. Tikhon. It's been colorized. But that's when he was elected Patriarch of Russia. And there's his icon. Most recently, we were glorified Saint Olga, the wife of a priest. She is a beautiful saint. Her full recognition will come this year. And Americans have been, members of Orthodox in America have been really hoping and praying and asking for her glorification. And yes,
sorry, I read up on her story. It's a beautiful story.
It is a wonderful story. She's a huge favorite of Rachel's.
I can see why.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's Saint Herman. Saint Peter the Aleut was one of the martyrs, the first martyrs of the American church. He was an Aleut young man who had been pressed to work in California with the fur trade, and he was he was captured by Spaniards in California, who tried to force him to accept Catholicism. And he said, "I'm already Christian." And they said, "No, you're not. Because you're not Catholic." And he was eventually tortured and killed because he wouldn't convert. And there's another picture of beautiful icon of Saint Herman, and Saint Herman with the native children. There's another icon of Saint Peter the Aleut, and Saint Juvenali was one of Saint Herman's colleagues that went with him when he approached the natives. They actually attacked him and killed him. And years later, one of the native shamans, the Saint Innocent, discovered him wearing the pectoral cross that belonged to Saint Juvenali, and he was told the story of how he died. There's an icon of his martyrdom. And there's Saint Innocent. A beautiful painting of Saint Innocent and his traveling around to the different villages, constantly traveling over the very unpleasant conditions. Another one of our very beautiful saints, a 20th century American saint, Saint John Maximovich. Ben, you were asking about Akathist. I very much recommend his Akathist. Reading that one. I think I can get you a copy of that.
I just recently read up on him a lot.
Wonderful saint. Died in 1963, I think. Maybe in 65. He was seen to sometimes levitate during liturgy. Just people could see that he was off the ground. Very humble. He was persecuted during his time. He was made fun of because he kind of had a lisp, and he would give away his shoes to the poor, so he often would be barefoot. But I very much recommend reading about him. But when they uncovered his body, it was completely incorrupt, and not decomposed at all. So there's a couple of books I would recommend. I just finished this book. It was a great book. Kind of speaks about the very colorful history we've had. The author is recognized as the kind of the expert on American Orthodox history. There's another great book here, Glorified in America, that's just come out recently. And then I definitely recommend Saint Innocent, Apostle to America. That's a great book on him. I'll be happy to loan you either Lost History or Saint Innocent. Let you enjoy that. So, do you guys have any questions? I'm gonna bring it back. I will tell you that you're going to encounter, when you encounter all these different Orthodox groups, it is, to me, it's kind of like different branches of the military.
That's a really good analogy.
I think so. The ranks of the different branches of the military are just like the the clergy and the different Orthodox churches, they're all recognized. They just have different chain of command. And hopefully, with the guidance of the Holy Spirit, it will eventually. We will see it unified. There is definitely efforts towards that. But as long as if you ever get the chance to visit Orthodox churches outside the country, I definitely recommend taking a letter from your priest, maybe using Google Translate if you need it translated. I did that when I went to Romania. And definitely when you visit Orthodox churches around the country, it's a good idea to email or contact the priest ahead of time, and let him know. It's really before you get in line for communion, but also visiting as a catechumen, it's good that they look out, they see a new face, they kind of have a clue what's going on.
I tried to do that, but they didn't look at their emails.
Yeah. Well, you tried.
The church I was going to in California was Antiochian. So, it was nice visiting that and seeing the subtle differences and all that. It was pretty nice.
Yeah, there's some variations. It is good to see it practiced. Ben and Shannon visited St. Simeon's last weekend. They could see some differences. It definitely gets packed these days. But it's a beautiful service, and but you'll find like when I was in Romania and I served in one of the churches, I was telling a priest, we were looking at the liturgy, and he says it's basically the same that you know, and I said it's always the same. Always the same liturgy. So when you're celebrating it, when we're all celebrating it, we're doing it together.
Okay.
But so I'll stop the recording.
So
yes.
question. You talked about some efforts for unification and so forth. I understand our history and the reasoning for why OCA exists as its own patriarchy, I guess. I've also
the term is called autocephalous.
Okay,
so
that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, it means self-governing. Governing. Yep. We're not under somebody another. We're not under a leader in another place.
Yep. So I understand our history. I've also heard other American priests in other traditions, Antiochian specifically, that are like, yeah, there's not an American Orthodox Church.
We're only recognized by the Church of Russia, if I believe.
Right. That's my understanding. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on why that is and where we're at with it.
Yeah. So we are recognized by almost all of the Slavic churches, Bulgarian, Serbian, by the I don't have the list in front of me, but we are. So it's more than just the Church of Russia, but the problem that Orthodoxy has encountered is we never really ironed out who has the authority to give independence to a church in another country. This is what Constantinople and Moscow are butting heads over right now in Ukraine.
I was reading up about that just this weekend.
And it will eventually get normalized. This is a family disagreement.
Mhm.
And there is when the Patriarch of Moscow recognized our independence, it was not universally agreed that that one church, that he could do that. Constantinople thinks only they can do it.
Okay.
We do, even back in the 1930s, there were gatherings of all the Orthodox leaders. And then in the 1960s, we had the Standing Conference of Orthodox Bishops in America, continue to cooperate. We work together for missionary efforts, for charity efforts. We cooperate, and the IOCC, the International Organization of Christian Charities, I think it's called, no, International Orthodox Christian Charities, where we bring relief to when there's a earthquake or catastrophes around the world. We work together with that. We work together for the prison ministry. And then about 10 years ago, it was decided that there needed to be this need to be given up. We need to go the next step. So the patriarch of all the patriarchs, all the other churches agreed that there would be bodies in the United States, Canada, Mexico, South America, Western Europe, Australia. There would be groups that officially were organized together, and we would do things like who's legitimately Orthodox, because especially in what you'd call the diaspora, out in these places, there have been groups, people who said, I'm Orthodox, yep, I'm legit, I'm bona fide, and they wouldn't be no more Orthodox legitimate than my cousin Bob. When I lived in Tuscaloosa, I knew a guy there that was a Catholicos Metropolitan. And he would come into the print shop I worked at making copies of icons, and he showed me a picture of himself in full regalia. The only person in his church was him. He didn't have any members or parishes or dioceses, or he just decided, I don't want to go to seminary. I'm just going to do it on my own. To be honest, I think he had other issues as well. Not a few issues, but yes, there's a lot of people that just don't want to follow the program. And when that group of evangelicals came into the church, not all of their group joined them, and they're still out there calling themselves Orthodox. So that's a very important thing. So we have groups that can tell you, and I can let you know. One of the other watershed moments in American history, the American Orthodox history, is when the Russian Orthodox Church ROCOR joined the Moscow Patriarch. They reunited. And so that really helped bring unity in this country. But there are efforts, and it is possible that one day the OCA has to give up its independence to join a larger group. We'll see where that goes. That's above my pay grade.
Yep, mine too. You mentioned that ROCOR united with the
Moscow.
Russian Orthodox Church, with Moscow.
Yeah.
But I'm still seeing stuff about ROCOR. Is there a splinter thing out there that didn't reunite, or are they just calling themselves that still?
There were a Russian Orthodox Church abroad. I think it is a group that disagreed with that decision. and stayed separate. There are Greeks that followed the old calendar. They're known as old calendars, Greek Orthodox, that aren't legit. There are Rokor is in communion with all of us. There's a split right now between Moscow and Constantinople because of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
They're, like I said, they're butting heads. The OCA stays out of it. But the important thing, if you ever have any questions, you can ask me or Father Basil. Do make sure, if you're going to visit another church, if you're going to have a priest come to visit you, that you let Father Basil know. Don't, if a priest wants to come visit you, let Father Basil know. Because it is supposed to be that bishops and priests, when they go visiting other places that are the responsibility of another outside their jurisdiction, that they have to have permission. So Anniston, kind of East Alabama, is under Father Basil. There's a parish there. It's just courtesy for another priest to not, it's called stepping on toes at the very least. So, okay. Any other questions?
Surprised no mention of Saint Seraphim Rose.
And he has been recognized as by a bishop, I think, in Georgia. A lot of people like to see him officially in America recognized as a saint, but
I didn't know that about it.
Yeah. So he and he is a subject, like I said, I was trying to hit the highlights. He is considered the apostle to converts and American converts. And he is hugely important in our history. I think I may have to do a class just on him. So I'm happy to talk about him, but I can't officially include him as one of the American saints. But his movement, yes, is very his life is hugely influential in this country. So, thank you for bringing him up.
So I'm reading the book he translated, the Orthodox Dogmatic Theology. So
yeah,
fresh on my mind.
And if you have any questions about that, that's a deep book. So, but it's a good. Orthodox we're not as formulaic as the Catholics are. There are fewer catechism, official books, but that's one of them. I guess it's one of the efforts. So, good book. All right. Well, one thing more I want to say. I'm going to stop the recording.